In this video, we'll look at the GridFlow Builder. If you watched the previous CellFlow tutorial, you already know the core concepts of the flow framework, where you can create paths, key locks, spawn points, and so on. GridFlow uses the same flow framework but outputs to a 2D tile map. It supports caves, elevations, and tile-based level design. Alright, let's start by creating a new level, make an empty level, and then go to Windows, Environment Light Mixer, create. And let's also enable volumetric fog in the exponential high fog. Not important, but looks nice. Next, drop in a dungeon actor, so dungeon architect, dungeon, reset the transform. And here we are going to use GridFlow Builder. Okay, so we have the GridFlow Builder. Now this expects a theme, of course, and we are also going to provide a GridFlow graph to it. Let's create that in the content browser. So right click on this and let's create a folder. New folder, my GridFlow, and let's create that graph here. So right click, dungeon architect, GridFlow graph. So GF my first. All right, now let's open that up, and this is your GridFlow graph. So let's start by creating the grid. So this is your initial working area. Let's hook that up to just see the results. I'm going to close this for now. I don't need this. So let's build, and you see this is the working area. This is where your paths would grow. You could create different paths and then branch them off, but they will all work within these nodes. So here you select the size, the initial working area, and think of each node as a large chunk in your dungeon eventually. So this is a high level graph that allows you to work on the high level structure of your dungeon without worrying about the low level details like the tiles and the meshes. So think of them as separate rooms or large cave chunks. So a value like 6x5, let's keep it as the default, but you can always change this. Let's make this 10x4, for example. You get something like this. All right, restore to the default, and here then now let's create our just like how we've done it in the CellFlow. Let's create the main path. So go ahead, create the main path, hook that up. If I select the main path, you can specify the path size, how big you want the path to be, and a bunch of other things we'll get to soon. Hit build and keep hitting build and you get randomized versions of these. Let's bring that down to maybe 8. Build. All right, now so to break the link, I'm holding down Alt and clicking on this pin. It breaks the link. So let's create let's make a create path node, and let's have a look at the values over here. The path size for the create path is anywhere from 3 to 5. So that is the range of the size. You can give it a name, just like how we've seen in CellFlow. You can specify a branch name and then use that at a later point to reference this path. Now it has to come off of something, and we're coming off of the main branch. So if you go to the main, create main path, the name of this path is main, and we can reference that here. And we say we come off of this. So let's build this, and you see somewhere around this path it's branching out from here, and optionally you can merge back into it as well. So if I give like this, and you see that this is emitting out of the main branch and option merging back like this. So we can have another one, for example, where we merge out from this one and merge back to this, any combination. So let's first select this and change the name. So we'll call it B1 here, and let's create another one, create path, call this B2, maybe change the color and break this and hook that up. Build, and here it's coming off of main. We want it to come out of B1 and maybe merge back to main. And let's see, and there you have it. and then you can go ahead and define whatever combination you want. So now let's go ahead and create a key lock. So let's do this. Let's create another path. Create path, and we'll call this key room, or let's call it treasure room. And somewhere in maybe in the red path, B2 comes out of B2, and the size is just 1. And let's build this. So we get a treasure room here, and I want the key for this to be somewhere in the blue, somewhere in the B1 path. So let's create a key lock node, and here you can specify what path you want to lock. So I want to lock this path, so which is the treasure room path. So let's also give a description here. And that shows up here. It's easy to organize. You copy this, and the lock path, the lock path is this. We want to lock this. And where do you want the key? We can keep the key somewhere here, or maybe in the alternate in the B1 path. And if I hit build, it has placed the key in this room. So this key lock is like an abstract concept. It's a high level concept. Could be anything. It could be like those retro game Doom levels where you collect the key cards of different colors and then open them up, or it could be more modern, like an NPC holding something, or it could be a lever that opens up a door. Anything that you like. So you can hook up your different blueprints, your key blueprints and the lock blueprints together during gameplay, and I will show you that later on. But this is a concept. So when the tile map is spawned, eventually it'll place this key somewhere in this chunk, and you are free to spawn anything you like, any blueprint you like using the theme editor. So we'll get to that later, but this is how it works, and it is guaranteed to create a playable level, as in you will not lock yourself out with this, where the key will always be accessible to play. Now, one thing you need to do in the end is called the finalize node, and this does a few things. Finalize graph, it'll convert some of the it'll convert some of the links to one-way nodes. So if I were to build this now, some of them have been promoted to one-way doors. So every link over here, you can think of them as connection points. There could be doors, and here we have a door that is converted to a one-way door, because if you were to take a direct path like this, we don't want you coming here, right? Because then that would be like a shortcut. Instead, it's expected that you go through this path, right? So it has some weight propagation through this graph, and then it figures out which one is the best node to create it as a one-way node, so that you take a round trip. You can have multiple key locks as well. So now let's add another key lock, and here we'd like to keep the key in this room that locks up the main path. So that would be something interesting, where we actually have to get this key and then open up this one, and then get this key and then open up the main path to reach the exit. So let's create that. Right click, create key lock, and place that in, and the key path would be this treasure room. So let's put this here. The key path is here because we want the key to be in this, and that is locking up the main path. Now what this would do is it will never create a scenario where you are locked out of the game. The key will always, the lock door will always be beyond the point where the key is accessible. So we're coming out of here and entering this path somewhere from here, so the lock should always be outside of this, somewhere over here. So let's see how this builds it. and let's follow through here. So we start with the start point, we come over here, 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 and then the door is locked. Right, so now we need to trace back, and this is a one way because we don't want to take a shortcut, so I just promoted this to a one way, so we have to go like this. Turns out we find a key here, go like this, and then we can open this up and then get the key for this lock, come back over here and do so. It creates infinite variations and it guarantees a playable level, and you can have many different combinations of these. Now let's spawn some enemies. So enemies or any blueprints that you want. So go ahead and create a spawn items node, hook that up, and you'd want to specify which path you want to spawn this on. So let's put some on the main path. So gonna get main, and maybe also the B1 path. So B1 or the B2 path, the red one, and hit build. So you see there are some nodes over here. So we have 3 enemies spawned over here, 3 over here, and so on. So let me show you. Now let's go ahead and create a tile map. So do a create tile map and then make another finalize tile map, hook them up, and build. And we'll see our tile map also generated here. So if I go to the start node, you see that this is this abstract node got promoted into a room like this, and then we have a cave, CA for cave. There's a cave chunk here, and there is one enemy spawned somewhere within this chunk. And as you keep going further, more and more enemies spawn. So we started with 1, and the difficulty keeps increasing as you go further. You can control that from here. Spawn method, linear difficulty, or just random. So it'll linearly increase it from the min count to the max count, or random, just pick any random value. Great way to spawn enemies, spawn any other objects. It could be anything. So how do you spawn enemies? You select this node, and here it takes in the marker name. So you want to give some marker name here, like grunt, and then create this marker node in your theme editor, and then attach whatever blueprint you want, blueprint or mesh you want, under this marker, and it'll spawn it there in that position. So build, and it'll generate this room, and then it'll spawn a marker with that name, and your blueprint, your theme engine is going to take care of spawning that in. All right, now let's beautify the tile map that is generated here. So we have a few options here, like create elevation. This is going to create some mountainous elevations below and above the sea line. So once you've created that, you want to merge it with the tile map itself. So layout, tile map, merge tile map node. So this is something you need to remember, just merge the thing with this. And now let's have a look. So it's creating this water level, and these are the height variations: deep water, shallow water, some ground. So let's select this node, change the noise settings. Let's change the frequency to 0.1, build, and we see some noise going on here. Now these are the number of steps. How many steps do you want from the highest to the lowest? Let's bump this up, maybe 12. You get a more gradual variation. Now you have the sea level, which is just purely visual, but that's something that you can use to visualize how it would look like. Let's set this to -1, build, and the min and max are both below sea level. So let's set the min value to -10, max value to 10. So these are the grid size logical units. So if your grid size, you set the initial grid size for your dungeon, which is the modular size, right? Might be 400, 400, and Z is 200. That is 200 units multiplied by 10, right? So we're talking in cell sizes. So let's build this. Some of the stuff is above water, some below it. Now let's also overlay some things here. We can maybe we might want to overlay rocks or trees. So let's create another overlay, create overlay, and then again merge that up. In the create overlay, let's build this and see. So it's going to overlay another noise based thing, but when we are overlaying it, anything above the certain threshold while merging, it will add trees to your landscape. So we have specified some configuration by default where we don't want to have these things above the water level, below the water level, so they just show up here on the ground. You can just adjust those values. So we will be creating a theme file, a beautiful theme file with trees and rocks, and we'll explore more on this. Have a look at the GridFlow sample in the Launchpad, and we have a more detailed example where we have we have quite a few overlays, rocks, trees, grass, and we also have them inside the dungeon layout, some of them replacing the walls, some of them building on top of the walls, and there are some non-obstructing things like grass that can spawn anywhere, and then there are obstructing occluding objects like large rocks that do not occlude the main path. So you have all of those configurations, and we'll explore these while building the theme in the upcoming video.